The sleek frame of the interstellar vessel, Odyssey cut through the vast darkness of space, its course set for the enigmatic world of Virelia Prime. Within the command bridge, Ambassador Daniel Carter stood with his hands clasped behind his back, his gaze locked onto the approaching planet, a mesmerizing sphere of blue and emerald. After months of travel, they had finally arrived, humanity's first official diplomatic mission to an alien civilization, entering Virelia Prime's orbit. "In 5 minutes, Ambassador," announced Captain Elena Vasquez from her command chair. Daniel nodded, his stomach twisting with a blend of anticipation and unease. At 46, he was among Earth's most seasoned diplomats. Yet this mission overshadowed anything he had undertaken before. The weight of humanity's relationship with an advanced alien species rested entirely on his shoulders. "Any final words of wisdom, Ambassador?" asked Dr. Lena Morgan, the mission's xenobiologist, her dark eyes alight with barely contained excitement. Daniel turned to his team. "Remember your training. Our goal is to foster connections, not incite conflict. The Virelians may appear similar to us, but their culture could be vastly different. Stay observant. Stay respectful." As the ship began its descent toward the orbital station, Daniel's mind raced through the limited knowledge they had of the Virelians. Humanoid in form, technologically, superior and open to diplomatic relations. Beyond that, they were stepping into the unknown. The docking procedure was seamless, and soon, Daniel led his team through the airlock and into the station. The architecture was breathtaking, fluid, organic, with iridescent surfaces that shimmered as if alive. A delegation of Virelians awaited them. Daniel inhaled sharply as he took in their appearance. If not for their slightly larger eyes and the delicate, shifting patterns on their skin, they could have passed for human. "Welcome to Virelia Prime, Ambassador Carter," said the lead Virelian. In flawless English, her voice smooth and melodious. "I am Ceres, Chief of Interstellar Relations. We are honored by your presence." Daniel inclined his head slightly. "The honor is ours, Chief Ceres. We come in peace and friendship, eager to learn about your people and culture." Ceres's lips curved in what Daniel hoped was a smile. "Then let us begin with a tour of the station. There is much to discuss." As they walked, Daniel noticed the Virelians maintaining a careful distance from his team. He made a mental note of the observation. The tour ended in a grand conference room where Daniel's team took their seats. A stern-faced Virelian entered, flanked by 2 security officers. "Ambassador Carter," Ceres said, "allow me to introduce Consul Elira, who will oversee our negotiations." Elira's sharp gaze locked onto Daniel. Despite her rigid demeanor, he couldn't ignore how strikingly human she appeared, save for the faint luminescent patterns dancing across her skin. "Consul," Daniel greeted, rising to shake her hand. "It is an honor to—" "Before we proceed," Elira interrupted, her voice crisp, "you must understand our protocols. Chief among them, there is to be absolutely no physical contact between our species. Is that clear?" Daniel blinked, momentarily thrown by her severity. "Of course, Consul. Though, may I ask why?" "The reasons are not your concern," Elira snapped. "Simply adhere to the protocol." An uneasy silence settled over the room. Daniel exchanged glances with his team, noting their shared confusion. Ceres cleared her throat smoothly. "Perhaps we should begin with a brief overview of our cultures to establish common ground." The following hours were a whirlwind of discussion. Daniel was captivated by Virelian society, their emphasis on collective consciousness, their astonishing biotechnology, their deep symbiosis with their environment. Yet, through it all, Elira remained distant, her responses curt, her demeanor almost hostile. As the meeting drew to a close, Daniel stood. "Thank you all for this enlightening exchange. I believe we have laid a strong foundation for future collaboration." Consul Elira, despite our initial challenges, I hope we can proceed with mutual respect and understanding. Instinctively, he extended his hand, a gesture ingrained from years of diplomacy. Several things happened at once. Saris gasped. No! Elira's eyes widened in shock. Before Daniel could react, his fingers brushed Elira's hand. A surge of energy, like raw electricity, ripped through him. Elira's eyes rolled back, and she collapsed to the floor. Chaos erupted. Varelian security forces swarmed, weapons drawn. Saris shouted orders. Daniel's team closed in around him protectively. "What have you done?" Saris's voice was ice cold, her previous warmth gone. "You were explicitly warned!" Daniel's mind reeled. I didn't mean to. It was an accident. Is she all right?" A groan from the floor silenced the room. Elira stirred, her eyes fluttering open. She sat up slowly, her expression twisted with fury. "You fool!" she hissed. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" Before Daniel could respond, another Varelian burst into the room and whispered urgently to Saris. Saris turned back to Daniel, her face pale with shock and disgust. "Ambassador Carter," she said, voice trembling, "scans confirm that you have impregnated Consul Elira." Daniel's breath caught. "That's impossible. We only touched hands for a second." Which was more than enough, Elira spat, struggling to stand. "Your human DNA has merged with mine. A new consciousness is already forming." Daniel's head spun. This couldn't be happening. Some kind of mistranslation, surely. "Please," he said, struggling to keep his voice steady. "There must be some mistake. Let's discuss this rationally." "There will be no discussion," Saris cut him off. "You and your team are confined to your quarters until we determine the consequences of this violation. Guards, take them away." As Daniel and his team were escorted out, he caught one last glimpse of Elira. The hatred in her gaze sent a chill down his spine. Whatever bridges he had hoped to build had just been reduced to ashes. Back in their quarters, his team erupted in a frenzy of questions. "How could you be so careless?" Dr. Morgan demanded. "You're supposed to be our top diplomat." "It was an accident," Daniel shot back, pacing like a caged animal. "A reflex. How was I supposed to know? A handshake would cause whatever this is?" Captain Vasquez, always the voice of reason, stepped between them. "Arguing won't help. The mission is in serious jeopardy. If we're not careful, this could escalate into an interstellar crisis." Daniel exhaled sharply. "You're right. We need more information. Lena, what do you make of this nanite transfer they mentioned?" Dr. Morgan frowned, her scientific curiosity momentarily overriding her frustration. "It's incredible. Their biology must be radically different from ours for genetic exchange to happen so quickly. But without more data, I can't begin to understand it." A chime at the door interrupted them. A grim-faced Varelian guard entered, flanked by two others. "Ambassador Carter," the guard announced, "your presence is required in the medical bay for examination. The rest of your team will remain here under guard." Daniel's team protested, but he raised a hand. "It's all right, I'll go." As he was led through the gleaming corridors, his mind churned with diplomatic strategies. But nothing in his years of experience had prepared him for this. The medical bay was a marvel of alien technology, its machines humming with strange energy. In the center of it all stood Elira. Her expression was unreadable, except for the cold fury in her eyes. "Lie down," she ordered, pointing to an examination table. Daniel swallowed hard and obeyed. "Consul, please," he said. "There has to be a way to—" "Silence," Elira snapped. Elira turned to a Varelian doctor. "Begin the scan. I want to know exactly what his human DNA is doing to my system." As the scan commenced, Daniel felt a strange tingling sensation course through his body. Holographic projections flickered to life around him, displaying intricate swirling patterns of energy. He couldn't begin to decipher them, but the doctor's reaction was telling. Fascinating, the Varelian murmured, studying the readouts. The merger is progressing far more rapidly than anticipated. The new consciousness is already forming neural pathways. Elira's expression darkened. How is that possible? It's only been a few hours. It appears the human's genetic material is catalyzing the process in unforeseen ways, the doctor explained. This hybrid entity, it could be unlike anything we've ever encountered. Daniel's mind reeled at the implications. Wait, are you saying that this child or whatever it is will be born soon? Elira whirled on him, her golden eyes blazing. This is not a child. It's an abomination, a threat to the purity of our species. Enough. A new voice rang out. Saris strode into the medical bay, her earlier diplomatic poise replaced by an air of command. The High Council has made its decision, Ambassador Carter. Your reckless actions have placed our entire world at risk. You and your team will be detained indefinitely while we determine the appropriate course of action. Daniel sat up, desperation rising in his chest. Please, be reasonable. This was an accident, not an act of aggression. Surely we can find a peaceful resolution. Saris's expression softened, if only slightly. I understand this was not intentional, Ambassador, but intentions matter little in the face of catastrophe. The hybridization process you've initiated is unprecedented. Until we fully comprehend its implications, we cannot allow further contamination. As Varelian guards moved to escort him away, Daniel locked eyes with Elira. For the briefest moment, he thought he saw something beyond anger in her gaze, fear, perhaps, or uncertainty. What will happen to her? He asked, nodding toward Elira. That is no longer your concern, Saris replied coldly. Guards, return the ambassador to his quarters. Full lockdown protocols are now in effect. As Daniel was led away, his thoughts spiraled. He had come to Varelia Prime to establish diplomatic ties. Instead, he had created a connection far more literal than he ever imagined, and in doing so, may have doomed them all. The door to his quarters slid shut behind him, the sound of multiple locks engaging with an ominous finality. His team looked up at him, hope fading from their eyes as they took in his grim expression. Well? Captain Vasquez asked. How bad is it? Daniel sank into a chair, the weight of the situation pressing down on him. Bad, he said quietly. Very, very bad. As he recounted what had transpired in the medical bay, Daniel couldn't shake the image of Elira's face from his mind. Somewhere, on this alien station, a new life was forming, a bridge between their species. But instead of unity, it threatened to tear them further apart. He had come to Varelia Prime to make history. Now he feared he had set both their worlds on a collision, course with disaster. Daniel stood motionless at the viewport, staring out at the alien stars. The diplomatic crisis he had inadvertently triggered was spiraling toward something far worse. He had to act. Fast. A soft chime from his communicator broke his thoughts. An encrypted message appeared on the screen, Medical Bay. AO 200, come alone, Daniels. Heart pounded. Elira wanted to meet. It could be a trap. But it was also the first opportunity for progress since their confinement. What is it? Vasquez asked, noticing his reaction. Daniel hesitated only a moment. Nothing important, just another warning to stay put. He couldn't risk anyone stopping him from attending this clandestine meeting. When the station's chronometer reached 01:55, Daniel put his plan into motion. He had discovered a minor flaw in the door's locking mechanism earlier, not enough to fully escape, but sufficient to slip out undetected. The corridors were eerily silent as he made his way to The medical bay, every shadow a potential hiding place for guards. But he reached his destination without incident, slipping inside the dimly lit room. "I wasn't sure you'd come." Elira's voice startled him. She stepped out from behind a cluster of glowing medical interfaces, her expression unreadable. Daniel's diplomatic instincts took over, keeping his voice steady despite his racing pulse. "I'm here to find a solution, Consul, for both our peoples." Elira's eyes narrowed. "And what solution do you propose for this abomination growing inside me?" The harshness of her words stung, but Daniel pressed forward. "It's not an abomination," he said firmly. "It's a bridge between our species, a chance for understanding we never could have imagined." "You don't understand what you've done," Elira hissed, stepping closer. "This bridge could destroy everything, our culture, our very way of life." Daniel didn't back down. "Or it could be the key to a future of cooperation and shared knowledge. Elira, please, help me understand your fears." Something in his voice seemed to reach her. Elira's posture softened, her rigid stance faltering. For the first time, he saw the exhaustion in her eyes. "You want to understand?" she said quietly. "Fine, follow me." She led him to a secluded corner of the medical bay, activating a holographic display. Daniel's breath caught as a swirling mass of light and energy appeared before him, pulsing with an almost sentient rhythm. "This is the developing consciousness inside me," Elira whispered. "It's evolving at an unprecedented rate. Our scientists can barely comprehend what they're seeing." Daniel stared at the display, mesmerized. "It's beautiful," he murmured. Elira's head snapped toward him, eyes flashing. "It's dangerous," she countered. "This hybrid mind, it has the potential to surpass both our species, to become something neither of us can control. Or," Daniel said carefully, "it could be the greatest diplomatic breakthrough in history." Elira's jaw tightened. "At what cost?" she demanded. But there was hesitation in her voice now, a crack in her resolve. Daniel took a chance. He reached out, this time deliberately, and clasped her hand. There was no jolt, no nanite surge, just the warmth of her skin. "We can face this together," he said softly. "Let me help you. Let me understand your world, your culture. There has to be a way forward that doesn't end in fear and isolation." Elira's fingers curled slightly around his. Her piercing gaze studied him, searching. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then, almost imperceptibly, she nodded. From that night forward, their secret meetings continued. Under the pretense of medical evaluations, they spent hours talking, sharing the intricacies of their cultures, their fears, their ambitions. Daniel learned of the Varelians' deep connection to their collective consciousness, the way individuality both intrigued and terrified them. Elira, in turn, came to understand humanity's relentless drive for exploration and connection. As the days passed, their discussions grew more personal. Barriers crumbled. Daniel found himself captivated by Elira's sharp intellect and hidden warmth. Elira discovered a gentleness in Daniel that belied his firm diplomatic exterior. One night, as they studied the hybrid's development, their hands brushed. The touch sent a thrill through both of them, something deeper than diplomacy, something undeniable. Their eyes met. And in that moment, everything changed. Their lips met in a kiss that defied biology and reason. Two beings from different worlds finding an unexplainable, inescapable connection. When they finally pulled apart, breathless, Elira whispered, "This is madness." Daniel cupped her face gently. "Maybe," he admitted, "but it feels right." A vortex of thoughts and emotions surged through Daniel's mind, leaving him breathless, yet exhilarated. "It's incredible," he told Elira one night, his voice brimming with wonder. I can feel its curiosity, its potential. It's not a threat, Elira. It's a gift. Elira's hand rested on her abdomen, her expression conflicted. Perhaps, she murmured, but the High Council doesn't see it that way. They're discussing termination. Daniel's blood ran cold. They can't. He grabbed her hands, urgency tightening his grip. Elira, we have to do something. Before they could. Form a plan. Alarms blared across the station. Daniel's communicator crackled to life with an urgent transmission from Earth. Ambassador Carter. The stern voice of his superior, Director Monroe, filled the room. The situation has escalated beyond our control. Conservative factions are demanding we sever all ties with the Virelians. You are ordered to return to Earth. Immediately! That's a direct order, Carter. Daniel's mind spun. Leave now. Abandon Elira. Their child. He turned, locking eyes with Elira. Fear shimmered in her gaze. He couldn't walk away. I'm sorry, sir, he replied, voice steady. I can't comply with that order. There's too much at stake here. Damn it, Carter, Monroe snapped. This is bigger than you. If you don't return, you could spark a war. Daniel's jaw tightened. Then I'll find a way to stop that war. From here. He cut the transmission, turning to Elira. We need to leave. Now, Elira nodded, her earlier doubts dissolving in the face of crisis. I know a place. A sanctuary in the mountains, run by a sect of scientist monks. They may be able to help us. With alarms wailing throughout the station, Daniel and Elira enacted their hastily formed escape plan. With the help of a few sympathetic members from both delegations, they slipped away, commandeering a small transport vessel. The journey to the mountain sanctuary was tense, each moment fraught with the risk of pursuit. But when they finally descended into a hidden valley, a sense of peace washed over them. The scientist monks welcomed them cautiously, their curiosity about the hybrid child outweighing any reservations. In the days that followed, Daniel and Elira found themselves in a haven free from political pressure. Here, they were no longer an ambassador and a consul. They were simply two people brought together by fate, seeking understanding. Their relationship deepened. Between research sessions and diplomatic strategizing, they stole quiet moments together. Daniel was drawn to Elira's resilience, the way she softened in his presence. Elira, in turn, found herself captivated by his unwavering hope. One evening, as they stood on a balcony overlooking the alien landscape, Elira turned to Daniel, tears glistening in her eyes. I never thought I could feel this way, she whispered. About you, about our child. I was so afraid, but now... Daniel pulled her close, his heart swelling. Now we face it together. Whatever comes next, we'll find a way. As if in response, a sudden pulse of energy washed over them, a telepathic wave from the hybrid consciousness growing within her. For a moment, their minds intertwined with their child's, their thoughts merging into something beyond human, beyond Virelian. And in that instant, they knew. This was no threat. This was something miraculous, a bridge between their species. But even as they basked in the glow of newfound hope, storm clouds gathered on the horizon. Both Earth and Virelia Prime were mobilizing. The threat of interstellar war loomed closer by the hour. Daniel gazed out at the alien sunset, his fingers tightly, entwined with Elira's. They had found love and created life against all odds. Now they would have to fight to protect it. And perhaps, in doing so, save both their worlds. As the first stars flickered in the deepening twilight, Daniel made a silent vow. He would find a way to make their leaders understand. The child growing within Elira wasn't a weapon. It was a promise. A promise of a future where the boundaries between species blurred, where understanding could triumph over fear. It wouldn't be easy. The road ahead was fraught with danger, But as the hybrid consciousness pulsed against his mind, Daniel knew it was a battle worth fighting. The next move was theirs, and the fate of two civilizations hung in the balance. Suddenly, the sanctuary shuddered. The first volley of weapons fire struck its protective shields. Daniel's heart pounded as he caught Elira, steadying her. The swell of her belly was a stark reminder of what was at stake. "They found us," Elira whispered, her voice laced with fear. Daniel's jaw clenched. It was only a matter of time. But we're not done yet. Around them, the scientist monks moved, swiftly, activating defensive measures and securing vital research. Through the panoramic windows, Daniel saw ships descending from both Earth and Verelia Prime. His stomach twisted. His own people were here, ready to fire upon him. A voice crackled over the comms. "Ambassador Carter, this is Admiral Holt of the Earth Alliance. You are ordered to surrender immediately and hand over the Varelian subject." Before Daniel could respond, another transmission cut through. "This is High Chancellor Xylin of Verelia. Prime, we demand the return of Consul Elira and the abomination she carries. Failure to comply will result in your annihilation." Daniel exchanged a look with Elira. The fear in her gaze had hardened into something else. "Resolve." He squeezed her hand. "We stand together." Taking a steadying breath, he activated the transmitter. "This is Ambassador Daniel Carter," he announced, his voice firm. "I request an immediate ceasefire. What's happening here is bigger than any of us. It could change the course of our civilizations forever." A tense silence followed. Daniel held his breath, feeling Elira's quickened pulse beneath his grip. Finally, Admiral Holt's voice returned. "You have 5 minutes, Carter. Make them count." Daniel exhaled sharply. It wasn't much, but it was a start. He turned to the scientist monks. "Can you establish a broadcast to both fleets? And if possible, relay it back to Earth and Verelia Prime?" The lead monk, a composed figure named Tavir, inclined his head. "It will be done, Ambassador. But be warned. The energy required may weaken our shields." Daniel set his jaw. "It's a risk we have to take." He looked at Elira. She nodded, understanding the weight of this moment. As the monks worked feverishly to establish the connection, Daniel paced, struggling to find the right words. How could he make them see? How could he make them feel what he had felt? "Elira," he whispered, his voice raw with emotion. She turned to him. He reached for her hand, and as their fingers intertwined, the presence of their child surged through them, a warm, pulsing energy, filled with infinite possibility. "This," she murmured. "This is what we need to show them, not just with words, but with feeling." Daniel's breath caught. An idea formed. He turned to Tavir. "Is there a way to amplify the hybrid's telepathic signal? Can we make them feel what we feel?" Tavir considered. "There may be a way," he said slowly. "But if we do this, there will be no turning back." Daniel met Elira's gaze. "No more running," he said softly. Elira nodded. "Then let's do it." 2. "Let everyone experience what we're feeling?" The monk's eyes widened. "It is possible," Tavir admitted, "but immensely dangerous. The psychic shock could overwhelm unprepared minds." "We have to try," Daniel insisted. "It might be our only chance." As Tavir and his team worked swiftly to make the necessary adjustments, Daniel felt the familiar tingle of the broadcast system powering up. He took a deep breath, squeezing Elira's hand one last time before stepping in front of the camera. "People of Earth, citizens of Verelia Prime," he began, his voice carrying across the stars. "I stand before you today, not just as a diplomat, but as a man transformed by an extraordinary journey." His words flowed freely now, fueled by the depth of his experiences and the urgency of their situation. "When I first arrived on Verelia Prime, I thought I understood the meaning of alien. I was wrong. What I have discovered here, the beauty, the complexity, the limitless potential of our two species coming together, it's beyond anything we ever imagined. He gestured toward Elira, who stepped forward beside him. This is Consul Elira of Virelia Prime. She is brilliant, courageous, and yes, alien to me in many ways. And yet, she is also the woman I love, the mother of our child. A ripple of collective gasps seemed to echo across the airwaves. Daniel pressed on, his voice growing more impassioned. I know the fear that drives you, the terror of the unknown, the instinct to protect what is familiar. But I tell you now, that fear will lead us to destruction. What we've created here is not an abomination. It is a bridge, a chance for true understanding between our peoples. His eyes blazed as he leaned toward the camera. You came here ready for war. I am asking you to open your minds to a different possibility. A future where our differences do not divide us, but propel us to new heights of discovery and cooperation. He turned to Elira, extending his hand. As their fingers intertwined, the child's consciousness surged, stronger than ever before. Let us show you, Daniel said softly. Open your minds and feel what we have discovered. With a nod to Tavir, Daniel braced himself. The monk activated the psychic amplifier. The universe exploded into light. Daniel gasped as their child's consciousness expanded, enveloping not just him and Elira, but radiating outward in waves of raw emotion. He caught fleeting glimpses of the minds it touched, the awe of the Earth soldiers, the shock of the Virelian warriors, the wonder rippling across two worlds. For a breathtaking moment, they were all connected, human and Virelian alike. Daniel felt their fears, their hopes, their immense capacity for love and understanding. Tears streamed down his face as he turned to Elira, seeing his own wonder reflected in her eyes. Then, just as suddenly, Elira doubled over with a sharp cry. "The baby," she gasped. "It's coming!" The psychic connection wavered. Daniel caught her, easing her gently to the ground. The observatory erupted into chaos. Monks rushing for medical supplies, the comm channels buzzing with confusion. "Stay with me," Daniel murmured, cradling Elira's head in his lap. "You can do this. We can do this." Elira's fingers tightened around his. Her eyes burned with pain, but also determination. "Together," she whispered. As her labor progressed, waves of psychic energy pulsed outward with each contraction. The entire sanctuary seemed to vibrate with the force of her emotions. Time became a blur, a cycle of whispered encouragement, deep breaths, and mounting anticipation. Then, with one final push, their child entered the world. The newborn's first cry resonated through the room, not just in sound, but in a wave of psychic energy that washed over everyone present. A hush fell. The monks swaddled the baby. Daniel and Elira leaned together, exhausted yet overwhelmed with joy. "It's beautiful," Daniel breathed, tracing a gentle hand over the child's delicate features, a seamless blend of human and Virelian traits. Elira nodded, eyes shimmering with tears. "A new beginning." As if in response to its parents' joy, the child's consciousness unfurled again. This time, it was not an uncontrolled burst, but a warm, deliberate extension, an invitation. Daniel felt minds linking across the sanctuary, the ships in orbit, and beyond. A web of shared emotion and understanding spanning two civilizations. A chime from the communication console shattered the silence. Admiral Holt's face flickered onto the screen. His expression was unreadable, a mixture of awe and uncertainty. "Ambassador Carter," he said hoarsely. We just experienced something. I don't even have words for it." Another screen flickered to life. High Chancellor Xylan appeared, her usual stern expression softened by astonishment. Consul Elira Xylan said slowly, her voice uncharacteristically gentle. Is it true? This child? It has abilities beyond either of our species? Elira cradled the baby close. It is more than that, Chancellor. Our child is a bridge between our worlds, a living embodiment of what we can become. Together. Daniel stepped forward, his arm around Elira's shoulders. What you all experienced today is just the beginning, he said. This child represents a new path forward, one of unity, of shared discovery. We are asking you to put aside your fears and embrace what's possible. Silence. Daniel held his breath, still aware of the weapons locked onto the sanctuary. Then, Admiral Holt exhaled. Stand down all weapons, he ordered. I think we need to talk. High Chancellor Xylan nodded. A ceasefire, and perhaps a delegation to meet this extraordinary child. The tension in the room eased, replaced by something fragile but real. Hope. As preparations began for the arrival of diplomats, Daniel turned to Elira, pressing a soft kiss to her forehead. We did it, he whispered. Elira smiled down at their sleeping child. No, my love, she murmured. We've only just begun. 5 years later, Daniel stood on the observation deck of Unity Station, staring at the breathtaking view before him. On one side of the window, Earth's familiar blue and white swirled. On the other, Virelia Prime's luminous glow pulsed, a constant reminder of how far they had come. Deep thoughts, Ambassador? Elira's voice pulled him from his reverie. She moved to his side, as poised and mesmerizing as the day they met. Daniel smiled, taking her hand. Just appreciating the view, and remembering how close we came to losing all this. Elira nodded. It feels like a lifetime ago. So much has changed. A high-pitched giggle rang out. A small figure raced into the room, a blur of laughter and shimmering skin. Nova, Elira chided playfully. What did we say about running on the station? Their daughter skidded to a halt, her iridescent eyes twinkling. Sorry, Mama, she chirped, but Uncle Xylan says the new hybridization project is about to start. Can I see the babies, please? Daniel chuckled, scooping her up. He exchanged a glance with Elira, who shrugged with a knowing smile. I don't see why not, she said. After all, our little bridge builder should be the first to welcome the next generation. As they made their way to the nursery, Daniel marveled at how much had changed. The Unity Accords, signed after Nova's birth, had ushered in a new era of peace and cooperation. The hybridization program, once feared, was now the cornerstone of an intergalactic alliance. In the nursery, Nova reached out with her telepathic abilities, connecting with the new hybrid minds. A wave of gentle energy pulsed through the room. Daniel felt his throat tighten. This was their legacy. Their love had changed the fate of 2 civilizations, and they were only just getting started. As Nova's laughter filled the air, Daniel knew their story would echo through the cosmos for generations to come.